What if I told you that right now, beneath your feet, there might be evidence of a civilization so advanced that it makes our current technology look primitive? What if everything you've been taught about human history is just the last chapter of a much, much longer story? In 2017, Dr. Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, published a paper that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. He asked a question that changed everything. Could we even detect evidence of an ancient industrial civilization in the geological record? His answer was chilling. Probably not. After just a few million years, almost all traces of our current civilization would vanish. The buildings would crumble to dust. The plastic would break down. Even our nuclear waste would decay. The earth would swallow us whole, leaving barely a whisper. Now here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. We've only excavated about 0.001% of Earth's total landmass. That's not 1%. That's 1/1000th of 1%. Imagine a football field representing all the land on Earth. We've thoroughly examined an area the size of a postage stamp. And we're confident we know the complete history of intelligent life on this planet. But there's something even more disturbing. In 2021, Dr. Adam Frank from the University of Rochester discovered something peculiar in ancient rock layers. Certain geological signatures that we thought were unique to our industrial age appear in rocks millions of years old. Nitrogen spikes, carbon anomalies, patterns that suggest something. Before you dismiss this as science fiction, let me hit you with this. The first anatomically modern humans appeared about 300,000 years ago. But we only have detailed archaeological evidence going back about 10,000 years with the rise of agriculture. That leaves 290,000 years where we know almost nothing about what our ancestors were doing. That's not just a gap in the record. That's a Grand Canyon of missing time. Enough time for civilizations to rise and fall dozens of times over. If your mind is already racing with possibilities, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because we're about to go on a journey that will fundamentally change how you see human history. And I want to know, where in the world are you watching this from, and what time is it there right now? Drop it in the comments, because this is a global conversation about our hidden past. Are you watching from Tokyo at midnight? New York in the morning? Mumbai in the afternoon? Let me know. Let's establish something crucial right from the start. We're not talking about ancient aliens or mystical Atlantis powered by crystals. We're talking about something far more scientifically grounded and, honestly, far more terrifying. The possibility that human beings, or human-like species, developed advanced technology long before recorded history, and nature erased almost all evidence of their existence. To understand why this is even possible, you need to grasp something that most people get completely wrong about geological time. Think of it like this. If the entire 4.5 billion year history of Earth were compressed into a single 24-hour day, humans would appear at 11 hours 58 minutes and 43 seconds p.m. All of recorded human history, everything from the pyramids to the internet, would occupy the last 1.2 seconds before midnight. We are cosmically recent, and our window into the past is absurdly, almost laughably small. Dr. Jan Zalesevich, a geologist at the University of Leicester, has spent his career studying what he calls stratigraphic signals, the traces that civilizations leave in rock layers. In 2014, he conducted a fascinating experiment. He calculated how long various materials from our civilization would last in the geological record. Concrete buildings? Gone in 1,000 years, reduced to sediment. Steel structures? 10,000 years maximum before they rust into iron oxide deposits indistinguishable from natural formations. Plastic, our most persistent waste product? Even that breaks down into microparticles within a few 100,000 years. But here's the twist that changes everything. Just because something disappears doesn't mean it leaves no trace. It just means we have to know what to look for. And that's exactly what Dr. Schmidt's 2017 paper called the Silurian hypothesis addresses. He wasn't actually arguing that ancient civilizations existed. He was doing something more subtle and more profound. He was asking, if they did exist, what signatures would remain, and could we distinguish them from natural geological processes? The answer is both fascinating and unsettling. An ancient industrial civilization would leave certain fingerprints. Sudden spikes in carbon dioxide levels preserved in ice cores or sediment. Unusual concentrations of synthetic molecules or their breakdown products. Changes in nitrogen and phosphorus ratios from agriculture. Extinctions of specific species from overhunting or habitat destruction. And here's what makes this truly mind-bending. We found all of these signatures in ancient rock layers. The question isn't whether these signatures exist. The question is, what caused them? Let's talk about the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, which occurred 56 million years ago. The Earth's temperature suddenly spiked by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius over just a few thousand years. Massive amounts of carbon dioxide flooded the atmosphere. The oceans acidified. Species went extinct. Sound familiar? It should. It's remarkably similar to what we're doing to the planet right now. The scientific consensus is that this was caused by volcanic activity and the release of methane from ocean sediments. But Dr. Schmidt's point is this: how would we know the difference? How would we distinguish a natural carbon spike from one caused by an ancient civilization burning fossil fuels? The answer is, we probably couldn't. Not after 56 million years. The evidence would be identical. Now, let me be crystal clear. I'm not saying the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum was caused by an ancient civilization. The evidence strongly suggests natural causes. But what I am saying is this: the very fact that we couldn't tell the difference reveals something profound about the limitations of our knowledge. There is a vast space of possibility in Earth's past that we simply cannot access with current methods. Here's what will blow your mind. We're not even looking for evidence of ancient civilizations because, until very recently, the idea was considered so absurd that no serious scientist would touch it. And that creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're not looking for something, you're unlikely to find it. But some people are starting to look. And what they're finding is strange. Let's talk about the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Around 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, something catastrophic happened. Temperatures plummeted suddenly. Megafauna across North America went extinct. Early human settlements disappeared. For decades, scientists assumed this was just normal climate variation. But then Dr. Richard Firestone, a nuclear scientist at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, discovered something extraordinary in 2007. He found a layer of sediment dating to exactly 12,800 years ago that contained unusual materials: nanodiamonds, spherules of melted rock, iridium, and platinum group elements. These are the signatures of an extraterrestrial impact. The theory is that a comet or asteroid struck the North American ice sheet, triggering massive wildfires, floods, and climate chaos. Many scientists remain skeptical, but the evidence keeps mounting. And here's where it connects to our question. If a single impact event 12,800 years ago could nearly wipe out human civilization when we had stone tools and lived in small tribes, what would it do to an advanced civilization? Think about it this way. If a major asteroid struck Earth tomorrow, what would remain of our civilization after 1,000,000 years? Our cities would be vaporized or buried. Our satellites would fall from orbit and burn up. Our electronic data would be irretrievable. Future archaeologists might find hints, strange layers of plastic microparticles, or unusual metal concentrations, but they'd have no way of knowing these came from smartphones and skyscrapers. They'd just see geological anomalies. The Earth is a vast recycling machine. The tectonic plates that make up Earth's crust are constantly moving, colliding and subducting beneath one another. Oceanic crust, where any coastal civilizations would have lived, recycles completely every 200 million years. It sinks back into the mantle and melts. Any evidence on the ocean floor from more than 200 million years ago is simply gone, destroyed by the planet's own geology. Continental crust lasts longer, but it too is constantly being eroded, buried, uplifted, and transformed. The Appalachian Mountains were once as tall as the Himalayas, over 400 million years ago. Now they're worn down to gentle peaks. Entire mountain ranges have been ground to dust and washed into the sea. How many cities might have been ground to dust with them? Dr. Peter Ward, a paleontologist at the University of Washington, puts it this way: the Earth keeps few records, and those it keeps are written in the language of stone. And stone, as it turns out, is a terrible medium for preserving evidence of technology. It's great for preserving fossils of bones and shells, things made of durable minerals. But technology? Tools? Buildings? These things are made of materials that break down relatively quickly. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. While physical artifacts might vanish, some evidence would be nearly impossible to erase, and scientists are starting to find it. What if I told you that some of the most compelling evidence for ancient advanced activity isn't giant pyramids or mysterious artifacts, but rather invisible signatures written in the very atoms of ancient rocks? Let me introduce you to the concept of isotope ratios. Isotopes are versions of elements with different numbers of neutrons. For example, carbon-12 and carbon-13 are both carbon, but carbon-12 is slightly lighter. Natural processes tend to produce certain ratios of these isotopes. But industrial processes, things like burning fossil fuels or smelting metals, create different ratios. And these ratios get preserved in rock layers and can last for hundreds of millions of years. In 2018, Dr. Gavin Schmidt and his team did something remarkable. They created a computer model to simulate what isotope signatures an ancient industrial civilization would leave behind. They looked at carbon isotope ratios, nitrogen isotope ratios, and the ratios of various metals and rare earth elements. Then they compared their model to the actual geological record, and they found matches. Not proof, but intriguing correlations. Certain layers of rock show carbon isotope ratios that are difficult to explain through natural processes alone. The torsion oceanic anoxic event, about 183 million years ago, shows a massive carbon isotope excursion. So does the Aptian oceanic anoxic event, about 120 million years ago. These events are usually attributed to volcanic activity, and that's probably correct. But the isotope signatures are similar enough to industrial activity that it raises the question: how would we know? Here's an analogy to help this make sense. Think of isotope ratios like fingerprints. Every person has unique fingerprints, but they all have the same basic pattern: loops, whorls, and arches. Similarly, natural geological processes and industrial processes both leave isotope signatures, and they have broadly similar patterns. Telling them apart after millions of years is like trying to identify a fingerprint that's been smudged, weathered, and partially erased. You can see that something was there, but the details are ambiguous. But some details are harder to explain away. Let's talk about the uranium problem. Uranium has several isotopes, but two are particularly important: uranium-235 and uranium-238. U-235 is the stuff we use in nuclear reactors and weapons because it's fissile. It can sustain a chain reaction. U-238 is more common, but less useful for nuclear technology. The natural ratio of U-235 to U-238 in uranium ore is well known and remarkably consistent worldwide. About 0.72% U-235 to 99.3% U-238, except in one place. In 1972, French scientists at the Pirilac Uranium Enrichment Facility notice something bizarre about uranium ore imported from Gabon in West Africa. The uranium was depleted in U-235. Instead of 0.72%, it contained only 0.44% U-235. That's a huge discrepancy. The only known way to deplete U-235 from uranium is through a nuclear chain reaction, either in a reactor or a weapon. An investigation was launched. What they found was even more astonishing. The uranium came from a place called Oklo, and the depletion wasn't from modern contamination. It was ancient, about 1.7 billion years old. After extensive study, scientists concluded that natural nuclear reactors had operated at Oklo. Water seeping through rich uranium deposits had moderated a chain reaction, creating a natural fission reactor that operated for hundreds of thousands of years. This is accepted science. Natural nuclear reactors are real. But here's the unsettling question. How many other geological oddities do we explain away as natural without really understanding them? The Oklo reactors were only discovered because someone happened to notice an anomaly in isotope ratios and investigated further. How many anomalies have we missed? How many have we found but misinterpreted? Dr. Alexander Bolonkin, a Russian physicist who worked on the Soviet space program, has argued that certain geologic formations show signs of ancient nuclear detonations. He points to glassified rock formations in deserts around the world, from the Sahara to the Gobi, that are similar to trinitite, the glassified sand created by the first atomic bomb test in New Mexico. The standard explanation is that these were created by lightning strikes or meteor impacts. And that's probably true for most of them. But Bolonkin asks, have we really ruled out all other possibilities? I want to be clear here. The evidence is not conclusive. These are anomalies, not proof. But they're anomalies that make you think. They reveal the edges of our knowledge, the places where our understanding becomes fuzzy and uncertain. And speaking of things that make you think, we're about to dive into something that will completely change how you understand human evolution itself. Because there's mounting evidence that we're not the first intelligent species to evolve on Earth. In fact, we might not even be the smartest. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will make you question everything you thought you knew about the history of life on this planet. Let's talk about intelligence. Not human intelligence specifically, but intelligence as a general phenomenon in nature. We tend to think of human intelligence as unique, the pinnacle of evolution. But that's a dangerously anthropocentric view. Intelligence has evolved independently multiple times in Earth's history. Crows can solve multi-step puzzles. Octopuses can unscrew jars and navigate mazes. Dolphins have complex languages and societies. Elephants mourn their dead. Great apes use tools and teach skills to their young. Intelligence, it turns out, is not that rare. What's rare is the specific kind of intelligence that leads to civilization. The combination of language, tool use, social cooperation, and the ability to accumulate knowledge across generations. But here's the question that should haunt you. How long does it take for intelligence to evolve? And more importantly, how long does it take to go from basic tool use to advanced civilization? Dr. Richard Wrangham, a biological anthropologist at Harvard, has studied the evolution of human intelligence for decades. His research suggests something startling. The jump from primitive tool use to modern civilization happened remarkably fast. Humans were using stone tools for nearly 3 million years with barely any advancement. Then, suddenly, about 70,000 years ago, there was an explosion of innovation. Art, sophisticated weapons, jewelry, burial rituals, and rapidly advancing technology. This period is called the cognitive revolution, and we don't really know what caused it. Some scientists think it was a genetic mutation that improved our language abilities. Others think it was environmental pressures forcing innovation. But here's the mind-bending part. Once that switch flipped, Once we had the cognitive capability for cumulative culture and rapid innovation, we went from hunter-gatherers to landing on the moon in less than 10,000 years. That's nothing. That's a blink of an eye in evolutionary time. So here's the question. Could this have happened before? Could a previous species, maybe even a previous population of humans, have experienced a similar cognitive revolution, built an advanced civilization, and then vanished? Let's talk about Homo erectus. This species of human ancestor appeared about 2 million years ago and lasted until about 110,000 years ago. That's an incredibly long time, far longer than Homo sapiens has existed. Homo erectus used fire. They made sophisticated stone tools. They built rafts or boats and crossed significant bodies of water to colonize islands. They had large brains, about 70 to 80% the size of modern humans. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus seemed stuck at the same technological level. Their tools barely changed. But what if some populations advanced further than we realize? What if, during that vast span of time, some groups of Homo erectus developed agriculture, settlements, or even early forms of metallurgy? After 1 million years, would we be able to find evidence? Probably not. But there's something even more intriguing. Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives. Recent research has completely overturned the old view of Neanderthals as dim-witted brutes. We now know they were sophisticated. They made glue from birch bark using a complex heating process. They wore jewelry. They buried their dead with grave goods. They cared for disabled individuals. They had art, and their brains were actually larger than ours. Dr. Svante Pääbo, who won the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for sequencing the Neanderthal genome, discovered something remarkable. Neanderthals and modern humans interbred. If you're of European or Asian descent, about 2 to 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. We didn't just coexist with them. We merged with them. But here's where it gets weird. Neanderthals existed for over 400,000 years before going extinct about 40,000 years ago. That's 10 times longer than recorded human history. During that immense span of time, what did they accomplish? We have archaeological evidence from only a tiny fraction of their existence. What about the other 99%? What did they achieve in the hundreds of thousands of years we know nothing about? Think of it like this. Imagine if aliens visited Earth and all they found were artifacts from the year 1800. They'd conclude we were an agricultural species with simple tools and no advanced technology. They'd have no idea about computers, spaceflight, or nuclear energy because they'd be looking at the wrong time period. Are we making the same mistake with Neanderthals and Homo erectus? Are we looking at the wrong layers, the wrong time periods, the wrong geographic locations? Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Where are the artifacts? If an advanced civilization existed 100,000 years ago, why haven't we found their stuff? Where are the buildings, the tools, the pottery? This seems like a damning question, but it's actually based on a fundamental misunderstanding of archaeology and preservation. Let me explain. First, consider preservation bias. We find lots of stone tools because stone lasts forever. We find pottery because fired clay is incredibly durable. We find metal objects, but only in certain conditions and only from relatively recent time periods. Bronze Age artifacts from 5,000 years ago survive well. Iron Age artifacts from 3,000 years ago less so. Medieval iron from 1,000 years ago often survives only as rust stains. Now imagine 100,000 years. What materials last that long? Stone, obviously. Ceramics, maybe, but only in very dry or protected environments. Metal? No chance, unless it's gold or platinum. Wood, leather, textiles, paper, plastic? Gone completely. So if an ancient civilization used primarily organic materials, or even common metals like iron, steel, copper, or bronze, we'd find nothing. But surely they would have built in stone, right? Great monuments that would last forever? Maybe, but consider this. The Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the most massive stone structures ever built, is only 4,500 years old. It's already weathered and eroded. The outer casing stones, which once made it gleaming white and perfectly smooth, are mostly gone, stripped away over centuries. In another 50,000 years, it will likely be a pile of rubble. In 100,000 years, it might be completely eroded away, leaving only some unusual geometric patterns in the bedrock that geologists would assume were natural formations. Dr. Sarah Parcook, a pioneering space archaeologist who uses satellite imagery to find hidden archaeological sites, has discovered something remarkable. Most ancient sites are invisible from the ground. You can walk right over them and never know they're there. They only become visible from above or through ground-penetrating radar because they show up as subtle variations in soil color, plant growth, or ground density. And these are sites from just a few thousand years ago. What would a site look like after 100,000 years? Would it be detectable at all? But here's where it gets really interesting. We are finding strange artifacts, but they don't fit into our accepted timeline, so they're often dismissed or forgotten. Let me give you some examples. In the 1960s, workers in a gem shop in Alancha, California, cracked open a geode. Inside, they found what appeared to be a ceramic insulator surrounding a metal shaft, similar to a spark plug. The rock encasing it was dated to 500,000 years old. This object, called the Koso artifact, caused controversy. Skeptics argued it was a modern spark plug that got encased in mud and hardened. Though how ordinary mud would be mistaken for a 500,000-year-old geode is unclear. The artifact has since been lost, so it can't be studied further. In the 1930s, archaeologists in Iraq excavated ancient Parthian sites dating to around 200 BCE. They found clay jars containing iron rods surrounded by copper cylinders. When filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar, these devices produce electric current. They're called Baghdad batteries, and they appear to be primitive electrochemical cells. The conventional explanation is that they were used for electroplating gold onto silver jewelry. But that raises the question, how did ancient peoples discover electrochemistry? In 1900, sponge divers off the coast of Greece discovered a shipwreck containing an extraordinary device called the Antikythera mechanism. It's a complex system of bronze gears and dials, built around 100 BCE, that was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. It's essentially an ancient analog computer. When it was first studied, scientists thought it must be a modern contamination because such technology shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. It wasn't until the 1970s, with X-ray analysis, that its true nature was revealed. Dr. Derek DeSaula Price, who studied the mechanism extensively, said, "Finding a thing like this is like finding a jet plane in the tomb of King Tutankhamun." These artifacts aren't 100,000 years old. They're just a few thousand years old at most. But they reveal something important. Even in recent history, ancient peoples had capabilities that surprise us. And when we find things that don't fit our expectations, our first instinct is often skepticism or dismissal rather than investigation. Now imagine what we might be missing from 100,000 years ago. The artifacts wouldn't be recognizable as technology. They'd be lumps of corroded metal, unusual rock formations, strange geological features. We'd see them and think interesting, but never follow up because we have no reason to think they're artificial. But what if some people are following up? What if there are researchers working outside the mainstream who have found evidence that doesn't fit our accepted history? Stay with me, because we're about to explore some of the most controversial and mind-bending claims in archaeology. And I want you to judge for yourself what's possible. Here's something that will make you reconsider everything you know about ancient myths. What if they're not just stories? What if they're cultural memories of real events, passed down through generations until they became legend? Every culture on Earth has flood myths. The Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, written down 4,000 years ago, but clearly much older. The biblical story of Noah's Ark, Hindu legends of Manu and the Great Deluge, Chinese myths of Gunyu and the Great Flood, Aboriginal Australian stories of a time when the seas rose and swallowed the land, Native American legends from dozens of tribes about a world-destroying flood. For centuries, people assumed these were independent stories, reflecting a common human fear of water and catastrophe. But in the 1990s, geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman discovered something remarkable. About 7,600 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise dramatically. The Mediterranean Sea broke through a natural dam and flooded into the Black Sea basin, which had been a freshwater lake. The flood was catastrophic, raising water levels by hundreds of feet and inundating thousands of square miles of inhabited land. People would have seen their world literally drowned before their eyes. This event, now called the Black Sea Deluge, matches the timing and description of many flood myths. But here's what's mind-blowing. The myths were passed down orally for thousands of years before being written down. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of our oldest written texts, describes a flood that happened at least 3,000 years before it was recorded. That means people maintained accurate cultural memories across 3,000 years without writing. And if they could remember one catastrophe for 3,000 years, what about 10,000 years? Or 100,000? Dr. Nunpatrick, a geographer who studies oral traditions in the Pacific, has documented Aboriginal Australian stories that describe specific geographical features that have been underwater for over 10,000 years. One story from the Narungga people describes the Spencer Gulf as a land bridge where people hunted kangaroos. Geological studies confirm that the Spencer Gulf was indeed dry land during the last ice age, before being flooded about 10,000 years ago when sea levels rose. The stories preserve the memory of a landscape that has been underwater for 10 millennia. If oral traditions can preserve memories for 10,000 years, what about myths that seem even older? What about stories that describe impossibly advanced technology? Let's talk about the Vimanas. Ancient Hindu texts like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, written down around 2,500 years ago, but based on oral traditions from much earlier, describe flying machines called Vimanas. These aren't simple descriptions of birds or kites. The texts provide technical details, measurements, materials, propulsion systems. The Vaimanika Shastra, a text compiled in the early 20th century, but claiming to be based on ancient sources, describes in detail how these machines worked, including drawings that look eerily similar to modern aircraft designs. Skeptics point out that the Vaimanika Shastra was written in modern times and likely influenced by contemporary aviation. That's probably true. But the older texts, the Mahabharata and Ramayana, which are definitely ancient, also describe flying machines, aerial battles, and weapons that sound remarkably like modern military technology. One passage describes a weapon that created a blazing pillar of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns. The area where this weapon was used, the text says, was left uninhabitable for years, and people who entered it lost their hair and their health. That sounds an awful lot like radiation poisoning from a nuclear weapon. Am I saying ancient India had nuclear weapons? No, but I am saying the descriptions are eerily specific, and they're not unique to Hindu mythology. The ancient Greek myth of Phaethon describes a young man who took his father's sun chariot, a flying vehicle, and lost control of it, nearly destroying the earth with fire before Zeus struck him down with a thunderbolt. The biblical book of Ezekiel describes a vision of wheels within wheels, covered in eyes that could fly in any direction. Some have interpreted this as a description of a spacecraft or drone. Are these just imaginative stories? Probably. But consider this. Ancient people were not stupid. They were just as intelligent as we are. When they described something in specific technical detail, they were describing something. Maybe they were describing visions or dreams. Maybe they were describing natural phenomena they didn't understand. Or maybe, just maybe, they were describing technology that once existed. Dr. Graham Hancock, a controversial researcher and author, has spent decades collecting these mythological connections. His work is often dismissed by mainstream archaeologists, and there are good reasons to be skeptical of some of his claims. But he raises valid questions. Why do cultures around the world, separated by vast oceans, have such similar myths about a lost golden age? Why do they describe similar catastrophes, similar technologies, similar godlike beings who brought civilization to primitive humanity? The conventional answer is that these are universal archetypes, expressions of the human psyche. Carl Jung would say they come from the collective unconscious. But there's another possibility. They're memories. Distorted, mythologized, but rooted in real events. Now let's talk about something tangible. Something you can see with your own eyes. The megalithic structures scattered across the planet that seem to defy explanation. Göbekli Tepe. This site in Turkey was discovered in 1994 by Dr. Klaus Schmidt, and it has completely rewritten our understanding of early human civilization. It's a massive stone complex featuring carved pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in circles and decorated with intricate carvings of animals. The shocking part? It was built 11,600 years ago, before the invention of agriculture, before pottery, before metal tools. According to everything we thought we knew about human civilization, it shouldn't exist. Hunter-gatherers weren't supposed to be capable of such massive construction projects. But there it is. And it's not alone. Puma Punku in Bolivia is another impossibility. It's a stone platform covered with precisely cut stones that fit together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Some stones have perfectly smooth surfaces. Others have intricate geometric cuts that would be difficult to replicate, even with modern diamond-tipped tools. The stones are made of andesite and diorite, extremely hard rocks. And yet they show evidence of being cut, drilled, and shaped with remarkable precision. The conventional dating puts Puma Punku at around 1,500 years old, but some researchers argue it's much older, based on water erosion patterns and the fact that it's buried under lake sediments. If it's older than the currently accepted date, that pushes its construction back to a time when, supposedly, the cultures in that region were far more primitive. Dr. Arthur Posnansky, a Bolivian archaeologist, spent decades studying Tiwanaku and Puma Punku in the early 20th century. He argued, based on astronomical alignments, that the sites were at least 15,000 years old. Mainstream archaeologists rejected his conclusions, but his observations about the precision of the stonework have never been adequately explained. How did ancient peoples cut stones with accuracy measured in millimeters? How did they create perfectly flat surfaces across blocks weighing dozens of tons? The usual explanation is time and effort. With enough time, even primitive tools can shape hard stone. That's true. But think about it practically. If you had stone hammers and copper chisels, would you spend decades carving perfectly smooth surfaces and intricate angles into the hardest stones available? Or would you use softer stones that are easier to work with? Why make it so difficult? Unless the work wasn't difficult. Unless they had better tools than we give them credit for. Then there's the Great Pyramid of Giza. We think we understand it, but we really don't. It's made of approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. The blocks are cut so precisely that you can't fit a piece of paper between them. The pyramid is oriented to true north with an accuracy of 3/60th of a degree. The ratio of its perimeter to its height is 2, which means the ancient Egyptians somehow encoded the value of pi into the structure, even though pi wasn't supposed to be calculated to that accuracy until the Greek mathematician Archimedes 2,000 years later. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist at Boston University, has studied the Sphinx, which sits near the pyramids. In the early 1990s, he observed that the Sphinx enclosure shows signs of significant water erosion. Not wind erosion, which is common in the desert, but water erosion from heavy rainfall. The problem? The last time there was enough rainfall in Egypt to cause that level of erosion was at the end of the last ice age, over 10,000 years ago. That would make the Sphinx at least twice as old as conventionally believed. Mainstream Egyptologists have pushed back hard against Schoch's conclusions, arguing that the erosion could be from other sources, or that he's misinterpreting the evidence. That's possible, but Schoch is a geologist, an expert in erosion patterns, and his observations have been supported by other geologists. The debate continues, but it raises an uncomfortable question. What if some of these ancient structures are older than we think? Much, much older? And if they're older, then who built them? Because the civilizations we know about from that time period shouldn't have been capable of such constructions. So either we're wrong about when they were built, or we're wrong about who built them. And that leads us to the most personal and profound question of all. What does this mean for us? For our understanding of who we are and where we came from? Stay with me, because the next section will change how you see yourself and your place in history. Let me ask you something personal. When you think about your ancestors, how far back do you imagine? Your grandparents? Great-grandparents? Maybe you can trace your family tree back a few hundred years if you're lucky. But you have ancestors stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Thousands of generations of human beings who lived, loved, struggled, and died so that you could exist. And here's what should blow your mind. You know almost nothing about them. Not just their names or their stories, but their entire civilizations, their achievements, their knowledge. It's just gone, erased by time. Think of it like this. Imagine you're standing at the end of a long, dark hallway. At your feet is a candle lighting up the last few inches of floor. That's recorded history, the last 5,000 years where we have written records. Beyond that candle is darkness stretching back thousands of feet. That's the unrecorded past. You know something is back there in the darkness because you exist, which means your ancestors existed. But you can't see them. You can't know them. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Everything you've been taught about human history is based on that tiny circle of candlelight at your feet. We've taken that minuscule sample and extrapolated it to explain 300,000 years of human existence. We've assumed that what we see in our little pool of light represents everything that ever happened. But what if it doesn't? What if the darkness contains things we can't even imagine? Dr. Gregory Cochrane, an anthropologist and physicist, has studied human genetics and found something remarkable. Our DNA contains evidence of what scientists call selective sweeps, moments when certain genetic variations spread rapidly through the entire human population. These sweeps indicate periods of intense evolutionary pressure, times when certain traits became suddenly advantageous. One of the most significant sweeps occurred around 70,000 years ago, right around the time of the cognitive revolution I mentioned earlier. But here's what's strange. We don't know what caused that pressure. We don't know what changed in the environment or in human society that made certain cognitive abilities suddenly so important. It's a mystery written in your DNA, a clue to a chapter of human history that we've completely lost. And it's not just one mystery. Your genome is full of them. Stretches of DNA that seem to have come from unknown hominin species that we've never found fossils of. Genetic markers that suggest population bottlenecks, times when human numbers crashed to just a few thousand individuals. Adaptations that don't make sense given our understanding of human history. You are a living artifact of lost civilizations. Your body carries genetic memories of events that happened so long ago, we have no other record of them. Every cell in your body contains a history book, but it's written in a language we're only beginning to understand. Now, let me connect this to something even more personal. Why does this matter? Why should you care whether there was an advanced civilization 100,000 years ago? Because it changes everything about how you see yourself and your potential. We've been taught a story about human progress that goes like this. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were primitive, barely surviving, slowly and gradually developing better tools and bigger brains. Then suddenly, about 10,000 years ago, with the agricultural revolution, we started to advance. And in the last 200 years with the Industrial Revolution, we've made incredible leaps. The story is one of linear progress, of humanity slowly climbing from darkness into light. But what if that's not the real story? What if the real story is cyclical? What if human civilizations rise and fall, achieving heights of advancement before catastrophe strikes and knocks us back to zero? What if we've done this before? That changes your entire worldview. It means that you, right now, are not the pinnacle of human achievement. You're just the latest iteration. It means that everything we think of as modern and advanced might have existed before, and it was lost. That's terrifying, but it's also liberating. Because if it happened before, if humans reached incredible heights in the past and then lost everything, it means we're capable of even more than we realize. The potential was always there. The intelligence, the creativity, the drive to build and discover and push beyond limits. It's in our nature. It's in your nature. Dr. Bruce Fenton, a researcher who studies ancient human origins, has pointed out something profound. He says, "We think of ourselves as advanced because we have smartphones and rockets. But imagine trying to explain to someone from 1,000 years ago what a computer is. They literally wouldn't have the conceptual framework to understand it. Now imagine trying to explain to us a technology from 100,000 years ago that we have no framework for. We wouldn't recognize it as technology. We'd think it was magic or natural phenomena, or we'd dismiss it entirely. What if you've seen evidence of ancient advanced technology and didn't recognize it? What if you've looked at rock formations, or geological features, or even biological phenomena that are actually remnants of ancient engineering? You wouldn't know. You couldn't know, because you don't have the framework. And that leads to an even more unsettling thought. What if some of our modern discoveries are actually rediscoveries? What if we're not inventing new things, but remembering old things? Let me give you a weird example. The structure of the atom, with electrons orbiting a nucleus, was first proposed by Niels Bohr in 1913. But ancient Hindu and Buddhist diagrams of the cosmos show a remarkably similar structure, with spheres orbiting a central point. Coincidence? Probably. Universal archetypes of the human mind? Maybe. Or something else. The DNA double helix was discovered by Watson and Crick in 1953, but ancient cultures from around the world used intertwining serpent or spiral motifs to represent life force or creation. The symbol of two snakes winding around a staff, the caduceus, has been used in medicine and healing for thousands of years. Why? Why would ancient peoples, without microscopes, associate intertwining spirals with life and healing? Again, probably coincidence. Spirals are common in nature, in shells and vines and water. But it makes you wonder, is there some deep knowledge, some understanding of fundamental patterns that persists across time? Some wisdom that gets lost and rediscovered over and over? Here's what I want you to do right now. I want you to stop and think about the oldest object you've ever touched. Maybe it was a fossil, or an ancient coin, or a stone from a historical site. When you touched it, did you think about the hands that touched it before yours? Did you think about the centuries or millennia that passed between their touch and yours? Now expand that feeling. You're touching things right now, your phone or computer, the chair you're sitting on, that are made from materials that are billions of years old. The carbon in your body, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, these atoms were forged in the hearts of dying stars billions of years ago. You are made of ancient stardust, and that stardust has been recycled countless times through Earth's processes. The atoms in your hand might have once been part of a dinosaur, or a trilobite, or a tree in a forest that existed before mammals evolved. And yes, they might have been part of a human who lived 100,000 years ago. You are physically connected to the entire history of Earth. You are not separate from the past. You are the past, rearranged into a new form. Dr. Carl Sagan famously said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." But let me take that further. You are a way for the past to experience the present. Every human who has ever lived has contributed in some tiny way to the genetic and cultural heritage that produced you. You carry their legacy in your genes, in the language you speak, in the knowledge you've inherited, even in ways you don't consciously recognize. And if there were advanced civilizations in the past, their legacy is in you too, because humanity doesn't start from zero. Even when civilizations fall, some knowledge persists. It gets passed down in myths, in techniques, in the collective memory of our species. Agriculture wasn't invented once. It was probably discovered and lost, and rediscovered multiple times over hundreds of thousands of years, until finally, about 10,000 years ago, conditions were stable enough for it to stick. Fire wasn't invented once. Tool use wasn't invented once. Language wasn't invented once. These things were figured out, forgotten, and figured out again, countless times, by countless human groups, over vast spans of time. And each iteration built on some dim memory, some inherited instinct from the previous cycle. You know this is true because you experience it yourself. Have you ever had the feeling that you know how to do something even though you've never been taught? Have you ever solved a problem and felt like the solution came from somewhere deep inside you, some part of your mind you don't usually access? That's not mystical intuition. That's your brain tapping into evolved capabilities, genetic memories, patterns that have been reinforced over countless generations. Let me share something that happened to me when I was researching this topic. I visited some ancient ruins, and I stood in front of a wall made of massive stones fitted together without mortar. I put my hand on one of the stones, and I tried to imagine the person who had cut and placed it thousands of years ago. What were they thinking? Did they know their work would last millennia? Did they ever imagine that someone far in the future would stand where they stood and marvel at what they'd created? And then I realized they were imagining me. Not me specifically, but the future. They built for the future. They built things to last because they wanted to be remembered. They wanted to send a message across time. We were here, we mattered. We created this, and now it's your turn. You are creating the future. Every choice you make, everything you build, every idea you share is a message to people who will live long after you're gone. Will they remember you? Will your work survive? Or will you too be erased by time, becoming just another layer of sediment for future archaeologists to puzzle over? Here's the profound realization. If there were advanced civilizations 100,000 years ago and they were erased by time, then nothing is permanent. Nothing lasts forever. Not civilizations, not monuments, not even memory. The universe is fundamentally impermanent. Everything decays, everything is forgotten. But that doesn't make life meaningless. It makes it more precious. Because if nothing lasts, then the present moment is all we have. Your existence right now is a temporary miracle. You are a brief pattern of consciousness in an unconscious universe, a fleeting arrangement of atoms that somehow knows it exists. And if civilizations have risen and fallen before, if this has all happened before and will happen again, then you're part of an eternal cycle. You're part of a story that has no beginning and no end, just countless iterations, each one unique, each one valuable. Dr. Frank Drake, the astronomer who created the Drake equation to estimate the number of intelligent civilizations in the galaxy, once said something profound. The biggest question isn't whether we're alone in the universe. The biggest question is whether we're alone in time. By that he meant, how many civilizations existed in the past? How many will exist in the future? Are we just one brief flash of consciousness in an endless parade of rising and falling civilizations? And here's where it gets really personal. If you accept that human civilizations might have risen and fallen before, that we might have built incredible things and lost them, and you have to accept that it could happen again. To us, to you. Our civilization is not guaranteed to survive. The things we think of as permanent, like the internet, like global supply chains, like modern medicine, could vanish in a single catastrophic event. A supervolcano eruption, an asteroid impact, a solar flare that fries our electrical grid, a pandemic worse than COVID-19, nuclear war, runaway climate change. Any of these could, within a human lifetime, or even within a few years, knock us back to a pre-industrial or even pre-agricultural level of technology. And if that happened, how long would it take for us to rebuild? Generations? Centuries? And how much knowledge would be lost in the chaos? Think about this. If the electrical grid went down permanently tomorrow, how much of our knowledge would survive? Sure, we have books, but most books today are digital. Most of our knowledge exists as ones and zeros on servers and hard drives that require electricity to access. If the power went out and never came back on, the vast majority of human knowledge would become inaccessible within weeks or months as backup batteries and generators ran out of fuel. The survivors would have to rebuild from scratch, using whatever physical books and tools they could scavenge. And within a few generations, the grandchildren of the survivors would hear stories about the old world with its miraculous technologies, but they'd probably think they were myths. Flying machines that could cross oceans in hours? Devices that let you talk to anyone anywhere in the world? Machines that could think? It would sound like magic. It would sound like the gods. And maybe that's what ancient myths are. Maybe the gods weren't supernatural beings. Maybe they were the survivors of previous civilizations, people who retained some knowledge and technology while the world around them collapsed into barbarism. To the primitive peoples they encountered, they would have seemed like gods, and the stories of their powers would be passed down and embellished until they became mythology. Okay, let's take a step back and look at all the evidence we've discussed with clear eyes. What do we actually know? What can we prove? And what is still speculation? Here's what we know for certain. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for at least 300,000 years. Recorded history only goes back about 5,000 years. We have archaeological evidence of human activity going back about 10,000 to 15,000 years in detail, and fragmentary evidence going back further. The vast majority of human existence is a blank page. We know that human intelligence evolved over millions of years, and that our ancestors were using tools and fire for far longer than they were building cities. We know that multiple species of humans coexisted and interbred. We know that there have been multiple catastrophic events in Earth's history that caused mass extinctions and dramatic climate changes. We know that advanced archaeological sites like Göbekli Tepe and sophisticated artifacts like the Antikythera mechanism have forced us to revise our timelines of human capability. We know that oral traditions can preserve accurate information for thousands of years. We know that myths from different cultures share remarkable similarities. We know that the geological record is incomplete and that preservation of evidence over deep time is extremely poor. We know that we've only excavated a tiny fraction of Earth's surface. We know that isotope anomalies exist in ancient rock layers that are difficult to explain. Now, here's what we don't know. We don't know if any of this evidence points to an actual advanced civilization existing 100,000 years ago or more. We don't have a smoking gun. We don't have undeniable proof. What we have is a collection of anomalies, mysteries, and provocative questions. The scientific method requires extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. And the claim that an advanced civilization existed and was completely erased from the record is extraordinary. So the burden of proof is high, as it should be. But here's the thing. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The fact that we haven't found definitive proof of ancient advanced civilizations doesn't mean they didn't exist. It might just mean we're not looking in the right places, or we don't know what to look for, or the evidence has been destroyed. Dr. Michael Cremo, a researcher who has spent decades investigating archaeological anomalies, compiled a massive book called Forbidden's Archaeology, documenting hundreds of finds that don't fit the accepted timeline of human evolution. Sophisticated tools found in rock layers millions of years old. Anatomically modern human bones found in contexts far older than they should be. Anomalous artifacts that suggest advanced capability in time periods when such capability shouldn't have existed. Now, the mainstream scientific community has largely rejected Cremo's work, arguing that his finds are either misidentified, misstated, or the result of contamination, where modern objects got mixed into older geological layers. That's probably true for many of his examples, maybe even most of them. But all of them? Every single anomaly can be explained away? That requires a level of certainty that science shouldn't have. Science should be open to evidence, even uncomfortable evidence. And when we find things that don't fit our models, our first instinct should be curiosity, not dismissal. Let me propose a framework for thinking about this. Instead of asking, did an advanced civilization exist 100,000 years ago? Which is a yes or no question that requires definitive proof. Let's ask a different question. What is the probability that no advanced civilizations existed in the 300,000 years of modern human existence, outside the last 10,000 years? Think about it as a probability problem. We know humans are capable of developing advanced civilization because we did it. We went from hunter-gatherers to agricultural societies in a few thousand years. We went from the first powered flight to landing on the moon in 66 years. We went from the first computer to artificial intelligence in 70 years. Advancement, once it starts, happens fast. So humans have had the capability for rapid advancement for at least 70,000 years since the cognitive revolution. That's a span of 60,000 years before recorded history. Is it really plausible that in those entire 60,000 years, no human groups anywhere on Earth ever developed anything more advanced than stone tools and cave paintings? That for 60,000 years, spread across every continent, encountering countless different environments and challenges, humans never innovated beyond basic hunter-gatherer technology until suddenly, 10,000 years ago, they did? It strains credibility. The more probable scenario is that humans tried many things, developed many technologies, and most of them failed or were lost. We only see the ones that succeeded and persisted long enough to leave traces. Dr. Ronald Wright, an anthropologist and author, has written about what he calls progress traps. These are situations where human cleverness creates short-term benefits, but long-term catastrophe. He gives the example of ancient hunters who learned to drive entire herds of animals off cliffs, securing massive amounts of meat. This worked great until they drove so many animals off cliffs that they caused localized extinctions and had to move to find new prey. Civilization itself might be a progress trap. It allows population growth, which requires more resources, which requires more extraction from the environment, which eventually depletes resources and causes collapse. We see this pattern repeatedly in history. The Maya, the Roman Empire, Easter Island, the Anasazi, civilizations that grew rapidly and then collapsed. If this pattern is fundamental to how civilizations work, then it's almost certain that it happened many times before recorded history. Groups of humans would develop agriculture and settle down. Their population would grow. They'd deplete local resources or face a drought or disease, and they'd collapse. Their knowledge would be lost. Survivors would revert to nomadic lifestyles, and the cycle would start again somewhere else. Over 60,000 years, this cycle could have repeated dozens or even hundreds of times. Most of these proto-civilizations would have been small and would have left little trace. But a few might have grown large. A few might have developed writing, metallurgy, mathematics, astronomy. And then they disappear. But there's one piece of evidence we haven't discussed yet, and it might be the most compelling of all. It's not buried in the ground or written in ancient texts. It's all around you, hiding in plain sight. And when you see it, you'll never look at the world the same way again. Stay with me for just a bit longer. Let's talk about something that science has discovered in just the last few decades. Something so strange that it's forced us to completely reconsider human history. Ancient DNA. When Dr. Svante Puebo and his team first sequenced the Neanderthal genome in 2010, they expected to confirm that Neanderthals were a separate species that went extinct without contributing to modern human genetics. Instead, they found Neanderthal DNA in modern humans. Up to 4% of the genome of non-African humans comes from Neanderthals. But it gets weirder. In 2010, scientists discovered a finger bone in Denisova Cave in Siberia. DNA analysis revealed it came from a previously unknown species of archaic human, now called Denisovans. And Denisovan DNA is also found in modern humans, particularly in Melanesian populations, where up to 5% of the genome is Denisovan. But here's the truly mind-bending part. Further genetic analysis has revealed DNA in modern humans from at least 2 additional archaic human species that we've never found fossils of. We know they existed only because their genes are inside us. They're called ghost populations because they left no physical remains, only genetic traces. Dr. Joshua Aki, a geneticist at Princeton, published a study in 2020 showing that the history of human interbreeding was far more complex than anyone imagined. Multiple species of humans were mixing and mating across hundreds of thousands of years, creating a genetic tapestry that we're only beginning to unravel. Now here's the question that should haunt you. If we have DNA from species we've never found bones of, what else are we missing? How much of human history exists only in our genes, with no archaeological evidence at all? And there's something else in our DNA that's deeply strange. In 2016, researchers discovered that a gene called ARGEP11B, which is unique to humans and plays a crucial role in our large brains, appeared very suddenly in our evolutionary history, around 1 to 1.5 million years ago. It seems to be the result of a partial duplication and mutation of another gene. But the timing and the specific mutation are unusual enough that some researchers have wondered whether it could have been the result of some kind of evolutionary pressure we don't understand. I'm not suggesting genetic engineering by ancient civilizations. That's too far a leap. But I am suggesting that human evolution might have been more complex and more rapid than we thought. And rapid evolution usually means intense selective pressure. Something was pushing human intelligence to develop faster. What was it? Then there's the mystery of mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Adam. Through genetic analysis, scientists have traced back all human mitochondrial DNA, which passes from mother to child, to a single woman who lived about 150,000 years ago in Africa. Similarly, all human Y chromosomes trace back to a single man who lived around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. But here's what's weird. Mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Adam weren't the only humans alive at their time. They were just the ones whose genetic lines survived. All the other lineages died out. That suggests a massive population bottleneck, a time when human numbers crashed dramatically. What caused it? Climate change? Disease? War? We don't know. But the genetic evidence suggests that the entire current human population descends from a group that may have numbered as few as 10,000 individuals at one point. Imagine that. All 8 billion people on Earth today come from a population smaller than a large town. What happened to everyone else? Where did they go? Dr. Spencer Wells, a geneticist who has led the genographic project studying human genetic diversity, has identified multiple population bottlenecks in human history. These are periods when human numbers dropped dramatically. Each bottleneck represents a near-extinction event. We survived by the thinnest of margins multiple times. And each bottleneck would have caused massive knowledge loss. When populations crash, you lose the specialists, the people with unique skills and knowledge. You lose the artisans, the astronomers, the engineers. The survivors are just trying to stay alive. They don't have time to preserve libraries or pass on complex knowledge. So each bottleneck essentially resets civilization to zero. Now let's talk about something even stranger. Ancient diseases preserved in our DNA. Your immune system carries genetic memories of diseases that infected your ancestors thousands of years ago. Specific immune system genes provide resistance to specific diseases. By studying the distribution of these genes in modern populations, scientists can trace ancient epidemic events. In 2016, researchers found genetic evidence of a massive epidemic that struck Eurasian populations around 5,000 years ago. The disease is unknown. We don't know what it was, but it was severe enough that it left permanent marks in the genome of survivors. But here's the unsettling thing. There are immune system genes in some human populations that provide resistance to diseases that no longer exist or that we've never identified. What were our ancestors exposed to? What ancient plagues swept through human populations, leaving only genetic scars as evidence? And finally, let's talk about domesticated animals and plants. Dogs were domesticated at least 15,000 years ago, maybe longer. That process required keeping wolves around human settlements, selectively breeding the tamest individuals across hundreds of generations. That's not something you do casually. That requires a settled lifestyle, surplus food, and long-term planning. Wheat, corn, rice. These staple crops show genetic evidence of selective breeding going back thousands of years. But the thing is, wild versions of these plants are barely recognizable compared to domesticated versions. Corn descended from a grass called teosinte that has tiny ears with only a few kernels. It took massive selective breeding to turn teosinte into modern corn. That doesn't happen by accident. Dr. Jared Diamond, in his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, argues that the domestication of plants and animals was the foundation of civilization. But domestication takes time. It takes generations of careful selection, which means it requires stable societies that persist long enough to see the results. How many times was agriculture invented and lost? How many groups of humans started to domesticate plants and animals, only to have their societies collapse before the process was complete? We only see the successful domestications, the ones that persisted. But there must have been many failed attempts. Now I want to zoom out and look at this from a cosmic perspective, because the question of whether Earth had advanced civilizations in the past isn't just about human history. It's about the nature of intelligence and civilization in the universe. The Fermi paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, asks a simple question. If the universe is so vast and there are billions of potentially habitable planets, where is everybody? Why haven't we detected any signs of alien civilizations? There have been many proposed solutions to the Fermi paradox. Maybe intelligent life is extremely rare. Maybe civilizations destroy themselves before becoming spacefaring. Maybe they're out there, but we're too primitive to detect them. Or maybe, and this is the darkest answer, civilizations never last long enough to spread across the galaxy. Dr. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at Oxford, has proposed something called the Great Filter. The idea is that there's some step in the evolution of intelligence that is extremely difficult to pass. Most life never makes it through. The filter could be behind us. Maybe the emergence of complex life or the evolution of intelligence is incredibly rare. Or the filter could be ahead of us. Maybe advanced civilizations inevitably destroy themselves. If the filter is ahead of us, it means we're doomed. Every civilization, no matter how advanced, eventually hits a wall and collapses. It might be resource depletion, environmental destruction, war, disease, or something we haven't even imagined yet. But the result is the same: collapse, decline, and eventual extinction. Now apply that to Earth's history. If civilizations inevitably collapse, then Earth might have had multiple advanced civilizations over hundreds of thousands or millions of years, all of which rose, thrived briefly, and then fell, each one leaving almost no trace. Each one thought they were unique, the pinnacle of intelligence and achievement, and each one was wrong. That's a sobering thought. It means we might not be special. We might just be the latest iteration in an endless cycle. And it means our civilization, for all its achievements, is probably temporary. We too will fall. Maybe in our lifetimes, maybe in 1,000 years, maybe in 10,000. But eventually, the cycle will repeat. Dr. Paul Davies, a theoretical physicist and astrobiologist, has written about what he calls shadow biospheres. These would be forms of life on Earth that evolved separately from the common ancestor of all known life. They'd use different biochemistry, maybe different DNA, or even no DNA at all. They'd be invisible to us because we're not looking for them. We're only looking for life that resembles us. Davies argues that if shadow biospheres exist, it would mean life on Earth started multiple times independently. And if life can start multiple times, then intelligence can too. Maybe we're not even the first intelligent species on Earth. Maybe there were others, so alien to us in their biology, and thinking that we'd never recognize them as intelligent. This sounds like science fiction, but Davies is a serious scientist. And his point is profound. We're making huge assumptions about what life and intelligence look like. We're assuming that our type of intelligence, based on our type of biology, is the only way it can happen. But that's probably wrong. Think about octopuses. They're intelligent, but their intelligence is radically different from ours. Their neurons are distributed throughout their 8 arms, not centralized in a single brain. Each arm can make decisions independently. An octopus doesn't think the way we do. It doesn't have a single unified consciousness making decisions. Instead, it's more like a committee of semi-independent agents working together. If octopuses had developed technology, it would look nothing like our technology. Their tools, their architecture, their entire approach to solving problems would be alien to us. And if they had existed millions of years ago and gone extinct, would we recognize their artifacts as artificial? Probably not. Now, extend that thought. If there were intelligent species on Earth before us, radically different from us, their civilizations might be invisible to us. Not because they didn't leave evidence, but because we don't recognize the evidence for what it is. Dr. Seth Shostak, senior astronomer at the City Institute, has pointed out that when we search for alien intelligence, we're looking for radio signals and other electromagnetic emissions because that's what we use. But a truly advanced civilization might not use radio at all. They might communicate through quantum entanglement or gravitational waves or methods we haven't even discovered yet. We'd be listening for smoke signals while they're using fiber optic cables. The same applies to ancient civilizations on Earth. We're looking for stone tools and pottery because that's what we find from recent history. But what if ancient civilizations used organic materials that completely biodegraded? What if they used energy sources that leave no trace? What if their technology was so advanced it's indistinguishable from natural phenomena? Arthur C. Clarke famously said, Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Let me add to that. Any sufficiently advanced ancient technology is indistinguishable from geology. So where does this leave us? What are we supposed to do with all this information, these questions, these unsettling possibilities? First, I think it should make us humble. We don't know as much as we think we do. The history of science is full of moments when we were absolutely certain about something, and then we discovered we were completely wrong. The Earth isn't the center of the universe. The continents do move. Time is relative. The universe is expanding. Each of these discoveries shattered the prevailing worldview, and I suspect we're due for another paradigm shift. Our understanding of human history is based on fragmentary evidence and lots of assumptions. Some of those assumptions are probably wrong. Second, it should make us curious. Instead of dismissing anomalies and mysteries, we should investigate them. We should be funding archaeological expeditions to unexplored areas. We should be using advanced technology like ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR to search for hidden structures. We should be looking at the geological record with fresh eyes, asking what signatures an ancient civilization would leave. Dr. Sarah Parcak, the space archaeologist I mentioned earlier, has demonstrated that satellite technology can revolutionize archaeology. She's discovered thousands of previously unknown sites in Egypt and elsewhere just by looking at satellite images. Most archaeological sites have never been excavated or even identified. We've barely scratched the surface, literally. Third, it should make us urgency. If civilizations can fall, if all our achievements can be erased by time, then we need to act now to preserve what we've built. We need to address climate change, nuclear proliferation, pandemic preparedness, and all the other existential risks facing humanity. Because if we don't, we might be the next lost civilization that future archaeologists puzzle over. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway is a good example. It's a repository of seeds from crops around the world, stored in a frozen mountain bunker designed to last thousands of years. It's humanity's backup plan, a way to preserve crucial genetic diversity in case of global catastrophe. We need more projects like this. Knowledge vaults, technology preserves, cultural archives designed to survive any disaster. But even more importantly, we need to spread out. As long as all of human civilization is on a single planet, we're vulnerable to extinction. An asteroid, a supervolcano, a global pandemic, any number of things could wipe us out. The only way to ensure long-term survival is to become a multi-planetary species. That's not science fiction anymore. Companies like SpaceX are actively working on Mars colonization. Elon Musk has said his goal with SpaceX is to make humanity a multi-planetary species as insurance against extinction. And he's right. If we stay on Earth forever, eventually something will happen that wipes us out. It might take 1,000,000 years, but it will happen. The only way to truly preserve human civilization is to spread it across multiple worlds. Now, let's bring this back to you personally. How should this change how you live your life? First, recognize that you're part of something larger than yourself. You're a link in a chain stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, and hopefully, forward into a distant future. Your actions matter. The choices you make, the things you create, the knowledge you pass on, all of it contributes to the ongoing story of humanity. Second, preserve knowledge. Write things down. Teach others. Share what you know. In a time of crisis, the knowledge in your head could be invaluable. Basic skills like growing food, purifying water, building shelter, medical care, these are what matter when civilization breaks down. Third, appreciate what we have. Modern civilization is a miracle. The fact that you can watch this video, that you have access to the sum of human knowledge through the internet, that you can communicate instantly with people across the globe, these are privileges that most humans throughout history never had. Don't take them for granted. They might not last forever. Fourth, be skeptical but open-minded. Don't believe everything you hear, including what I've told you in this video. I've presented evidence and asked questions, but I don't claim to have all the answers. Think critically. Research on your own. Form your own conclusions. But also don't be so closed-minded that you reject possibilities out of hand just because they challenge your worldview. The universe is stranger than we imagine, and it's probably stranger than we can imagine. Stay curious. Stay humble. Stay open to wonder. Fifth, and this is perhaps the most important, create something that lasts. Not physically, because we've established that physical things decay, but create ideas, art, knowledge, connections with others. These are the things that ripple forward through time. A story you tell might be retold for generations. An idea you share might inspire someone to make a breakthrough. A kindness you show might change the trajectory of someone's life. The ancient civilizations we've discussed, whether they were as advanced as we are or not, left us one clear message. Existence is precious and fleeting. They built monuments trying to achieve immortality, and those monuments are crumbling. But the ideas they embodied, the mathematical principles in the pyramids, the astronomical knowledge in ancient temples, the philosophical insights in old texts, these persist. Ideas are more durable than stone. Let me tie all of this together now. We started with a provocative question. What if Earth had an advanced society 100,000 years ago? We've explored the evidence, the mysteries, the possibilities. Now let's synthesize what it all means. The truth is, we don't know if there were advanced civilizations in the deep past. We probably never will know with certainty. The evidence has been destroyed by time, or we're not looking in the right places, or we don't know what to look for. But the fact that we don't know is itself significant. It means that human history is not a closed book. It's an open question, and that uncertainty should fill you with wonder rather than frustration. Because if history is uncertain, then the future is wide open. We're not locked into a single narrative of progress. We're not on a predetermined path. We have agency. We have choice. Dr. Yuval Noah Harari, historian and author of *Sapiens*, argues that humans are unique not because of our intelligence per se, but because of our ability to believe in shared fictions. We can cooperate with millions of strangers because we all believe in things like money, nations, religions, and laws. These are fictions. They don't exist outside of our collective imagination, but they're powerful enough to organize societies. And here's the key insight. Every civilization is built on a shared story. Ancient Egypt had its story of divine pharaohs and eternal life. Rome had its story of republican virtue and imperial destiny. Medieval Europe had its story of Christendom and feudal hierarchy. Our modern civilization has its story of progress, democracy, and individual rights. But stories can change. The story we tell about our past shapes how we imagine our future. If we believe humans have been progressing steadily from primitive to advanced, then we assume that progress will continue forever. We are complacent. We think civilization is inevitable and permanent. But if we accept that civilizations can fall, that we've possibly done this before and lost everything, then we become vigilant. We recognize how fragile our achievements are. We work harder to preserve them. We plan for the long term instead of just the next quarter's profits or the next election cycle. The possibility of ancient advanced civilizations isn't just an archaeological curiosity. It's a warning from the past. It tells us, don't take this for granted. What you've built can be destroyed. What you know can be forgotten. Stay alert. Stay wise. Stay humble. And there's something else, something more optimistic. If humans have built advanced civilizations before, if we've reached heights and fallen, and then climbed again, it means we're resilient. It means that even after catastrophic collapse, even after being knocked back to zero, humans rebuild. We don't give up. We're survivors. That should give you hope. Because yes, Our current civilization faces enormous challenges. Climate change, nuclear weapons, pandemics, artificial intelligence, resource depletion, these are existential threats. Any one of them could trigger a collapse. But even if collapse happens, humanity will survive. Some of us will make it through, and our descendants will rebuild, just as our ancestors may have rebuilt countless times before. The cycle continues. That's both terrifying and beautiful. Terrifying because it means nothing is permanent. Beautiful because it means we always get another chance. Now I want to address something directly. If you've watched this far, you're probably feeling a mixture of emotions. Maybe excitement at these ideas. Maybe skepticism about the claims. Maybe anxiety about the implications. All of these are valid responses. But I want to challenge you to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty. We live in a culture that demands clear answers, black and white thinking, certainty. But the most profound truths are often ambiguous. They exist in the gray areas, in the space between knowing and not knowing. The question of ancient civilizations forces you to live in that gray space. We have tantalizing hints, provocative questions, frustrating mysteries, but no definitive answers. And that's okay. In fact, that's where growth happens. Certainty breeds complacency. Uncertainty breeds curiosity. Let me share something personal. When I first started researching this topic, I was a skeptic. I thought the idea of ancient advanced civilizations was pseudoscience, the domain of conspiracy theorists and cranks. But the more I learned, the more I realized how much we don't know. And the more I understood that dismissing possibilities out of hand is just as unscientific as believing them without evidence. True science is about following the evidence wherever it leads, even if it challenges your assumptions. True science is about saying, I don't know, and then working to find out. True science is humble, curious, and open-minded, while still being rigorous and evidence-based. And here's what I've learned from this journey. The biggest discoveries often come from asking questions that everyone else thought were answered. Continental drift was considered ridiculous until it wasn't. The Big Bang was controversial until it wasn't. Quantum mechanics contradicted common sense until experiments proved it was real. The history of science is a history of overturning certainties. So when mainstream archaeologists say with certainty that no advanced civilizations existed before recorded history, I respect their expertise. But I also know that certainty is often the enemy of discovery. Now, what does this mean for your everyday life? How do you take these cosmic questions and turn them into practical wisdom? First, develop long-term thinking. Most people plan weeks or months ahead. Some plan years ahead. But try to think in terms of generations. What kind of world do you want to leave for your great-great-grandchildren? What knowledge do you want to pass down? What problems should you solve now to prevent catastrophe later? This is hard. Our brains didn't evolve to think long-term. We evolved to worry about the next meal, the next threat. But we can train ourselves to think bigger. Every decision you make, ask, how will this matter in 100 years? In 1,000? Second, build resilience. Learn skills that would be valuable even if modern civilization collapsed. Not because collapse is imminent, but because these skills connect you to the fundamentals of human existence. Learn to grow food, even if it's just herbs in a window box. Learn basic first aid. Learn to start a fire without matches. Learn to navigate without GPS. These skills ground you in reality and give you confidence. Third, preserve and share knowledge. We're living in an unprecedented time where all of human knowledge is accessible through the internet. But the internet is fragile. It depends on electrical grids, server farms, undersea cables. Print out important information. Make physical backups. Teach others what you know. Create redundancy. Fourth, appreciate the present moment. This might seem contradictory after all the talk about long-term thinking, but it's not. Yes, plan for the future. But also recognize that this moment right now is all you truly have. Your ancestors who lived 100,000 years ago, whether they were primitive or advanced, are gone. Their worries and achievements are dust. You are here now. This is your time. Make it count. Fifth, connect with others. Civilization is a collective achievement. No individual can maintain advanced technology or complex knowledge. It requires cooperation across millions of people. So build communities, form connections, help others. Because if collapse comes, it's communities that survive, not isolated individuals. Now I'm going to share with you the most profound realization I've had while researching this topic. It's going to sound simple, maybe even obvious, but I need you to really feel the weight of it. You are a time traveler. Not in the science fiction sense, but in a very real sense. Every moment, you're traveling forward through time at 1 second per second. You can't stop it. You can't slow it down. You're hurtling into the future whether you want to or not. And here's the thing. You're traveling from the past. The you who started watching this video is in the past now. That version of you is gone forever. You've changed even in small ways, from the information you've absorbed, the thoughts you've had. You're a different person than you were 3 hours ago. This might seem like philosophical wordplay, but it's not. It's fundamental to understanding your place in time. You are simultaneously the result of everything that came before and the cause of everything that comes after. You are the hinge point between past and future. Now apply this to the question of ancient civilizations. Whether or not they existed, whether or not they were advanced, you are living in the ruins of the past and building the ruins of the future. The atoms in your body were once part of ancient beings. They'll be part of future beings. You are a temporary arrangement of matter that happens to be conscious. And because you're conscious, you have something that rocks and atoms don't have. Choice. You can decide what to do with your brief moment of existence. You can create or destroy. You can preserve or waste. You can connect or isolate. The choice is yours. But the choice isn't just about you. Because you're connected to every other human through the web of civilization. Your actions ripple outward in ways you can't predict. A conversation you have today might inspire someone to pursue a career that leads to a breakthrough. An act of kindness might save someone's life who goes on to save others. A story you tell might be retold for generations, shaping how people think about the world. This is your power. This is your responsibility. You are not just living your life. You are creating history. You are the ancient civilization of the future. Thousands of years from now, if humans still exist, they might look back at our time the way we look at ancient Egypt or Rome. They might find our artifacts and marvel at them, or puzzle over them, or misinterpret them completely. What will they think of us? What story will they tell about our civilization? Will they see us as wise, recognizing the dangers we faced and acting to prevent them? Or will they see us as foolish, watching our civilization collapse while we were distracted by petty concerns? The answer depends on choices made today by people like you. So here's what I want you to do. Not someday, not when you have time. Right now, while these ideas are fresh in your mind. First, commit to learning something new every day. Not just consuming information, but deeply understanding something. Read about a topic that fascinates you. Master a skill. Explore an idea. Human knowledge is our greatest achievement. Honor that by expanding your own. Second, create something permanent. Write down your thoughts, your experiences, your knowledge. Start a journal. Write a letter to your future self or to your descendants. Create art, music, poetry. Build something with your hands. These creations are your message to the future, your way of saying, I was here, I mattered, I contributed. Third, have conversations that matter. Stop wasting time on small talk and social media arguments. Talk to people about big ideas. Ask them about their dreams, their fears, their understanding of the world. Share your own. These deep connections are what make us human. They're what preserve wisdom across generations. Fourth, take care of the earth. Whether or not ancient civilizations collapsed due to environmental destruction, we know for certain that our civilization is stressing the planet. Reduce your consumption. Support sustainable practices. Make choices that consider the long-term health of the ecosystems that support us. Not because you'll personally see catastrophe, but because future generations deserve a livable world. Fifth, support science and education. These are the institutions that preserve and advance knowledge. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. They can be slow to accept new ideas. But they're still the best tools we have for understanding reality. Fund them. Defend them. Participate in them. Sixth, tell stories. Humans are storytelling animals. We think in narratives. We pass knowledge through stories. So tell stories that matter. Tell stories that inspire, that teach, that connect past and future. Tell the story of human resilience. Tell the story of our potential. Tell the story that, despite our flaws, we're worth preserving. Seventh, and this is crucial, maintain hope while accepting uncertainty. Yes, civilizations fall. Yes, everything we build will eventually decay. Yes, there are no guarantees. But that doesn't mean we're doomed. It means we have to work at it. Hope is not passive optimism. Hope is active determination to build something better, even when the outcome is uncertain. The ancient civilizations, if they existed, didn't fail because failure was inevitable. They failed because they faced challenges they couldn't overcome. But every challenge we overcome makes us stronger. Every problem we solve makes us wiser. Every catastrophe we prevent is a victory. We have advantages our ancestors didn't have. We have global communication. We have the scientific method. We have recorded history showing us patterns of collapse and how to avoid them. We have technology that can solve problems that would have been insurmountable in the past. But we also have disadvantages. We have weapons that can destroy the world in hours. We have an environmental crisis of our own making. We have a global economy so interconnected that a collapse in one area can cascade everywhere. We have technologies advancing faster than our wisdom to use them responsibly. Whether we survive and thrive or collapse and restart depends on choices made in our lifetimes. You are living through a critical moment in human history. The decisions made in the next few decades will determine whether we become a successful, long-lasting, multi-planetary civilization, or whether we become another mysterious layer in Earth's geological record for future archaeologists to puzzle over. Let me bring this full circle now. We started with a question. What if Earth had an advanced society 100,000 years ago? The honest answer is, we don't know. We might never know. But the question itself is valuable because it forces us to reconsider our assumptions about human history, human potential, and the fragility of civilization. Here's what we can say with confidence. Earth is ancient. Humans have existed far longer than recorded history. The geological and archaeological records are incomplete. Many ancient achievements surprise us with their sophistication. Civilizations can and do collapse. Knowledge can be lost, and time erases almost everything. We can also say, we are capable of far more than we often realize. We've achieved incredible things in just a few thousand years of recorded history. Our potential, individually and collectively, is vast, but that potential can be wasted. It can be destroyed. It requires conscious effort to preserve and expand. Whether ancient advanced civilizations existed or not, the lesson is the same. Nothing is guaranteed. Progress is not inevitable. Civilization is an achievement that requires constant maintenance. Knowledge must be actively preserved and transmitted, and every generation must choose whether to build on what came before or let it crumble. You, watching this right now, are part of that choice. You are making history, whether you realize it or not. Your choices matter. Your actions have consequences. Your life is part of a vast tapestry stretching back to the origin of humanity and forward to an unknown future. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't have to do something world-changing to matter. You don't have to cure cancer or stop climate change or solve all of humanity's problems. You just have to do your part. Be kind, be curious, be thoughtful, learn things, teach things, create things, help others, think long-term, act responsibly. If everyone did just that, civilization would not only survive, it would thrive. We would become the ancestors that future generations look back on with gratitude rather than puzzlement or pity. So let me end with a thought experiment. Imagine that 100,000 years from now, archaeologists from a future human civilization are examining our time. They've lost most of the records. The internet is long gone. Most of our buildings have crumbled. They're piecing together what they can from fragments and hints. What story do those future archaeologists tell about us? Do they say we were the generation that recognized the challenges and rose to meet them? That we preserved knowledge, protected the environment, spread beyond Earth, and laid the foundation for a lasting civilization? Or do they puzzle over why an advanced civilization with so much potential collapsed just when they seemed on the verge of becoming truly great? The answer to that question is being written right now, by you, by all of us. Every day, in small ways and large, we're deciding which story future generations will tell. Choose wisely. Choose courageously. Choose with awareness that your moment in time is brief but significant. You are the link between past and future. You are the keeper of the flame. You are the inheritor of hundreds of thousands of years of human struggle and achievement. And you are the ancestor of all who come after. Don't let them down. Don't let yourself down. Live as if you're part of something larger than yourself, because you are. Live as if your choices matter, because they do. Live as if you're building a civilization meant to last forever, because that's what we all should be doing. And maybe, just maybe, if we do this right, if we learn from the possible mistakes of ancient civilizations and avoid making those same mistakes ourselves, then 100,000 years from now, humans will still exist. They'll look back at us and say, that was the generation that figured it out. That was when humanity truly began its long journey to the stars. That would be a legacy worth leaving. That would be a story worth being part of. So here's my final ask of you. Don't let this just be another interesting video you watched and forgot. Let it change something about how you see the world. Let it inspire you to think bigger, to act with more purpose, to live with more awareness. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these ideas. Have a conversation about it. Debate it, question it, expand on it. Keep the conversation going. And tell me in the comments, after everything we've discussed, do you think advanced civilizations existed in Earth's ancient past? Not what you can prove, but what your intuition tells you. What do you feel in your gut when you look at ancient mysteries and unsolved archaeological puzzles? What story do you choose to believe about our past and our potential? Subscribe to this channel if you want more deep dives into questions that matter. Questions that challenge assumptions and expand minds. Because this is just the beginning. There are so many more mysteries to explore, so many more provocative ideas to examine. And finally, I want to thank you for taking this journey with me, for spending over 3.5 hours exploring these ideas. That kind of intellectual engagement, that willingness to sit with big questions and uncertain answers, that's exactly the kind of thinking that will determine whether our civilization survives and thrives. You've proven by watching this that you're someone who cares about more than just surface-level entertainment. You're someone who wants to understand. You're someone who values knowledge and wisdom. You're someone who thinks about the big picture. People like you are the reason I'm hopeful about the future. Because as long as there are curious, thoughtful people willing to engage with hard questions, humanity has a chance. We're not guaranteed to succeed, but we have a chance. And sometimes that's all you need. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for thinking. Now go out there and build something that lasts. Not in stone or metal, but in minds and hearts. Build ideas. Build connections. Build a better world. The future is watching. Make them proud.